Tonight, we're going to have a wonderful program of 3 speakers, 3 artists. We're also going to have polls at the beginning of the our webinar. We're going to, you could shout out where you're joining us from, which town or which country. You can also, we're going to have a second poll that will let us know whether you are glazier or not glazier yet. And we're going to have talks by 3 amazing artists, to which I'm going to tell you later on. And our master, David Stringer-Lamar, will be also introducing us to tonight's webinar. And at the end, we're going to have word of thanks, and you're going to learn a lot about stained glass. And at the end, you also will be able to ask some questions. We will answer your questions the best we can. We will have a poll for our questions as well. So please either post your questions, or once the questions are posted, you can vote for the most interesting questions. And I will ask 3 questions at the end. And that's our round for tonight. And I would like to now, we're going to start our first poll, in which you could let us know whether you are, where you're joining us from. And the poll starting now. We have 1 minute to complete. You can either from UK, from EU, from United States of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or elsewhere. Wonderful participation. Keep going. I'm going to cast my own vote. And we have another 30 seconds to finish the poll. Please participate. We have 96% are joining us from England, 2% from EU, 2% so far from United States of Canada. We're still voting. Tonight we have amazing amount of people. Over 90 people are joining us tonight. So welcome one and all. It's wonderful to see so many participants. And we have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, close the poll. Excellent. And the results are, we have 96% are joining us from EU, 96% are joining us from UK, 2% are joining us from EU, and 2% are joining us from United States or Canada. Thank you very much for participating in this poll. And next poll we're going to have is, are you glazier or are you not glazier yet? And those who are not glaziers, I hope we're going to share much more information about our fantastic livery, to which we will let you know later on. Okay, we started the poll. Are you a glazier? Please participate in our poll. We'd like to know who is a glazier, who's not glazier yet, but he's interested in joining, or none of the above. It's quite lovely to see such a good participation. And once again, we have half a minute to go. Please do cast your vote if you haven't done it so yet. And we have a little bit longer to go. So far, we have roughly 50% of participants of this webinar are glaziers, and 22 and 26% so far are either 22% are interested in joining, and 26 and none of the above so far. Well, we keep going. We have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're finishing the poll. So far we have wonderful 51% of participants who are glaziers, which is kind of majority. And then we have 22% of participants who are not glaziers yet, but would like to learn more or interested in joining, and 27% of none of the above. Now, thank you so much for participating in our poll so far. We started with a quick start. And our next step, I would like to introduce David Stringer-Lamar, our master.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, Mariana Cherry, for kicking us off in such an excellent fashion. So I'm David Stringer-Lamar, the Master Glazier. So a very big warm welcome from me to all of you for joining us this evening. I'm noting there we have some friends from the European Union and the USA and Canada. So a particularly warm welcome for you all as well. I'm informed that we're also joined by the master tiler and bricklayer and the master tax advisor. So thank you very much for sparing the time to join us. You're most welcome. We also have members of the world traders, the Fletchers, the goldsmiths, lightmongers, and others as well. So one of the great things about the glaziers and our friends, of course, in the livery movement is we're all very connected. So thank you very much for joining us. I just want to say a big thank you to everybody involved in putting on this webinar tonight. Obviously, our speakers, but also the people behind the scenes, as it were, and particularly to one of my stewards and an artist as well, Oksana Kondratyeva, who's been monumental in putting all this together for us this evening. Now, stained glass memorials or commemorative stained glass windows, I think, are a unique way to remember. It can be dedicated to people, an event, and of course allows the family, community, and the wider society to come together, discuss, and be part of the past, but also the present and indeed the future. Now, of course, Great Britain has a long-standing tradition of commemorative stained glass art, indeed since medieval times. And today, not one, not two, but three renowned artists are going to share their experience of designing and making commemorative stained glass windows with us this evening. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure it's going to be excellent. I look forward to hearing all the questions that you're going to be answering of them. Back to you, Mariana, and thank you.
Thank you, David. Tonight, we are having a presentation of three amazing artists. Artist number one is John Reyntiens, is best known for his work in stained glass. John trained in fine and decorative arts at City and Guilds of London, going to work with Ray King in Philadelphia, Cedar Press in Australia, and Graham Jones in London, before setting up his own glass studio in 1996. In the last 26 years, John has led projects on a range of public and private buildings, from the restoration of glass in Windsor Castle following the fire to numerous new church windows at the Diamond Jubilee window for Her Majesty the Queen in Westminster Hall. John brings passion for art in its various forms and a forensic eye for details to every project he undertakes, whether the scale, pushing the boundaries of traditional stained glass and contemporary design. Welcome, John. Our next presenter is renowned glass artist Douglas John. Douglas John, he studied drawing and painting with stained glass at Edinburgh College of Art. He's done many different amazing things. And most importantly, he was installed the glass that he created for Her Majesty the Queen to create the windows marking the Diamond Jubilee. It was installed in a Queen's Chapel of the Savoy in central London in 2012. In 2003, he was awarded the Saltire Society Prize for Art and Architecture. Most recently, in 2016, his work was recognized by Sir John Radcliffe Trust for its contribution for glass and architecture. That's our artist number two. And our artist number three is renowned Helen Whittaker. She is a renowned artist and the designer of stained glass windows and architectural sculptures in glass and copper, with over 100 commissions in prestigious buildings across the UK. Helen aimed to engage the viewers through a good design and craftsmanship, creating energy and movement. Most important, one of the most important Helen's work is, so she designed Helen's two windows for RAF Club in London, her towering glazing scheme for the Queen Our Lady of Lourdes Chapel in Finwest City, Alamang, Philippines, and collaboration with David Hockney, RA, with Huggy O'Donoghue for Westminster Abbey. Helen is creative director for highly acclaimed Barley Studio in York, heading the multi-skilled team alongside managing director Keith Barley. Helen is a liveryman and a court member, the executive body of the Worshipful Company of Glaziers. Welcome all. And our first presenter is Helen Whittaker. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mariana. And it's a pleasure to speak with you this evening. May I have the first slide, please? Thank you. So over the last 30 years, I've created many commemorative windows commissioned for buildings across the UK and beyond. I love working to commission as each project stimulates my creative approach by making pictures, creating stories, and drawing the viewer in. And all are driven by the client, the brief, and the building. So to begin, what do we mean by commemorative art? At its most basic, it's artwork designed to celebrate and remember a person or event. And stained glass is an ideal medium, being physically durable as it becomes part of the building it is housed within. And stained glass also harnesses the power of light to intensify its impact and illuminate our minds, keeping memories alive. A very traditional inclusion in stained glass was the donor figure, as seen here of Abbot Sugar of Saint Denis, intended to memorialise the donor and their family, to elicit prayers for them after their death. In today's commissioned artworks, the donor may continue to be a powerful driver, as are the custodians of the building, whether it's secular, religious, private, or public. Public buildings bring another potential stakeholder in the form of the general public, who may also have their own ideas of what this ancient medium should look like. So, as artists, how do we navigate the wishes of the donor, the clients, the building, and the public? In my own work, I always bring my own creative expression to the commission, with the aim to enlighten and expand the viewer's notion of this traditional medium. I'd like to therefore share some examples of memorial and commemorative art in religious settings, showing a range of my different approaches. Next slide, please. This small memorial is to a young man who tragically lost his life in Tanzania. He spent his final months engaged in rewarding community work in East Africa. The imagery is personal to him. You might note there's a dash hound in the bottom right of the window, and all is set within a Christian context. The design depicts the 7 days of creation, as described in the book of Genesis, set out from the concentric circles, each encompassing flora and fauna of East Africa. Day 1 represents the firmament, formless and empty, and concludes with the inscription at the top of the window that tells us on the 7th day, and then he rested. Next slide, please. These 2 windows will be installed in the coming weeks. They were commissioned by twin siblings, Tim and Jill Alston, whose farming family had a long association with the Glaziers Company. For those who knew Tim and Jill, they were bold and colourful characters, and my design reflects this. The brief given by Tim was to celebrate the local landscape and travel, inspired by Richard Hakluyt. Hakluyt was once rector of Wetheringset Church and published important works on travel and migration. The framework behind the composition is inspired by Ortelius' Atlas of 1570, the first modern atlas which Hakluyt probably knew. The windows contain some biblical references, but overall the image is not overtly religious. Sadly, both Tim and Jill have since died, so the windows they commissioned have become their own memorial. Next slide, please. And here is the completed left-hand window. Bottom right, we see an open book. Bottom left, apologies, we see an open book with an image of a 16th century sailing ship, a symbol of personal voyage through life and beyond. To its right, a wonderful line of Walt Whitman. Now, voyager, sail thou forth to seek and find. A floating page shows the coat of arms of the Worshipful Company of Glaziers, here being inspected by the master on a visit to Orley Studio. Next slide, please. And some details of the right-hand window with a map from Ortelius's Great Atlas to guide the traveller. And to the right, some associated fish of its seas. Next slide. I've also worked with two Royal Academicians to create large commemorative windows for aspects of the reign of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II at Westminster Abbey. Both subject and treatments were left to the discretion of the artists, and both responded to the existing by doing something totally different. Hugh O'Donoghue's two windows in the Henry VII Chapel were commissioned to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Her Majesty's coronation in 2013. The symbolism of the Marian windows is his response to the location of the Lady Chapel. They make no reference to anything personal or to the existing windows nearby. In 2018, I was commissioned to work with David Hockney to create the Queen's window as the most celebrated living British artist of her reign. Hockney's design showed the view down a country lane bordered by hawthorn blossom, which he has described as a celebration of the Queen as a countrywoman and her great love of the countryside. Next slide, please. More recently, I created a large glazing scheme for a new chapel commemorating the life of the donor's grandfather within a whole newly built city. My designs were inspired by the lily-like form of the chapel, designed by Japanese architect Hiroshi Nakamura, with a towering roof like an inverted flower. Next slide, please. There are 6 windows in total, each 20 metres high, which is approximately 65 feet, set between the curving planes of the roof. Here my designs incorporate Marian symbols in an abstracted form at the centre of each window. The sequence of colours is arranged to reflect the covenant of the rainbow. Next slide. This window to the former treasurer of St Cuthbert's Church, Craik, was commissioned and realised during the last months of his life. The brief was to celebrate the life of St Cuthbert and to be inspired by the magnificent Lindisfarne Gospels and by the wonderful stories attributed to this great northern saint. I was very keen to explore this very traditional subject in a contemporary way, with St Cuthbert framed within the letter C. C is for Cuthbert, C is for Craik, and C is for Christianity. The form of the letter is borrowed from the medieval illuminated Gospels, with the surrounding tapestry of decoration also inspired by the same manuscript. The face of the saint is actually a portrait of the donor. Next slide, please. And here are a few details representing some of the many stories of St Cuthbert's life. Next slide. To finish, here are 3 more examples of many of my different responses to commemorative stained glass. To the left, we have St Helen's Church, Lee, where the bold image of a traction engine celebrates the local Marshall family business, placed within the ploughed land forming the shape of a Christian cross. In the centre at St Lawrence's Church, York, I've included a portrait of one of the York Normandy veterans as he was leaving his landing craft towards the beaches of Normandy. And finally, All Saints Church, Penarth, where I've used one of the architect Dale Owen's own important buildings, Aberystwyth Arts Centre, to symbolise the heavenly Jerusalem. Every one of the commissions I have shown has its own style and drawn carefully from careful consideration of the client, the brief and the building. I like to experiment with my design so that each commission is ultimately its own individual work of art. Next slide, please. Thank you for listening.
First slide, please. The Queen's Chapel of the Savoy is all that remains of a large medieval manor extending from the city along the north bank of the Thames to where the Trafalgar Square is now. It was severely damaged in the Blitz. The late art critic Brian Sewell told me that as a child he accompanied his uncle to a service of Thanksgiving amidst the ruins at the end of the war. Round the turn of the 60s, the windows were reglazed in a range of mostly armorial bearings. One centrally placed window, however, had been left vacant, so there was great anticipation as to which royal occasion would be celebrated. For decades, the opportunities came and went until the Queen decided on her Diamond Jubilee year of 2012. Next. Although I could repeat the type of soberly remote and undemonstrative glasswork already there, I was happy to leave this opportunity to others. But in learning that the selection process was being run in an enlightened manner, I changed my mind. The window was unveiled by Her Majesty on the 1st of November 2012 with the Duke of Edinburgh present. Slide. For over 10 years beforehand, I had been taking my work abroad for specialist execution, as there was nowhere in the UK where I could achieve my experimental aims. Now I was embarking once again on a traditionally made stained glass commemorative window, staying at home and drawing it up in my studio. Good fun. I enjoyed this. Next, please. My references embrace themes of continuity, development, heritage, and inheritance. In the lower areas, the timelessly held qualities of good leadership are present in representations of justice and honour. While trolling the archives of Lancaster House for any clue of personal secrets, I found that she had altered the mounted image on the County Palatine seal by adding her beloved corgi dog. That and her signature made good personal references. In the areas above, formality falls away as symbols for the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme and Prince Charles Trust cross into the garland of roses and pearls surrounding the royal cipher, confirming the royal family's developing inclusion in civic life, assisting in public projects, and encouraging personal attainment. The first Elizabethan period is referred to with the associated sun and moon symbols. Both Old Bess and Lilibet's reigns saw great advances in science and the arts. Ascending heralds accompany the faint echo of choirs in the starry blue heavens. Next. The external aspect of the work is important. Referencing a more open and shared democratic role of the royal family, I used glass materials and processes that would catch an old light to enact on the outside. Everybody can share in this, a levelling down, one would call it today. A random scatter of dichroic fragments runs down the length of the two central lancets in the manner of falling rose petals being released from a trapdoor above the Elizabethan stage during royal celebrations. The lancets are protected by 8mm thick sheets of anti-reflective float glass shaped and tempered. This innovative product was unavailable in the UK, so had to be processed in Germany and brought across. Shot glass technology produces this for the built environment. All other glass surfaces reflect light, and this stuff doesn't. Any flashed daylight would have severely compromised the legibility of my exterior endeavours. This instance was the first and maybe still the only example of this sort of protection being used in the UK. Prescriptive heritage bodies and conservators, please take note that this is just simple technical innovation. Next. Two forgotten stone recesses above hold sooty pieces of 18th century glass. The design was a surprise bit of luck for me, as I was intending to use an old quarry design as part of my next piece of work. Next. That same year, my newly created torn fragment form is embedded in a heavy glass piece cast over sand. Next. The Fragments of Time project of 2012 consists of 2 composite mounted glass structures set within deep daylight ingos on either side of a mounted wall piece. These were created for the 400-year commemoration of the original church at Gillen in East Lothian having been abandoned due to repeated incursions of sand. The congregation were moved 4 miles east to Dirleton. Echoing the quarries in the window behind, these decorated pieces give greater resonance to the presence of a special time fragment with a royal connection. Next. The left-hand assemblage shows another glass cast taken from the old decorated Norman arch in the ruin. The graphic day and night Elizabethan time references appear again as fragments. Next. This is a detail of the architectural reference in the sand cast. The sand used was taken from the original site. Next. Another artwork planned for the big day in Dirleton was the Sands of Time, involving 4 large kiln-formed clear glass plates being baptized between tides overnight on the offending beach. Next. The anointed items were brought to Dirleton and laid out in front of the altar, sprinkled with a mix of sand and ash. The flower arrangements were beautiful, and the moderator of the Scottish General Assembly planted a tree. Next, some years earlier, I had been asked to provide artwork for the entrance porch of the Abbey Church at North Berwick. I included these doors, the inner sanctuary doors, and a wall poem. Pilgrims bound for St Andrews would prepare themselves nearby for the 4-mile sea crossing of the Firth of Forth. In A Scattering of Doves, I paint-primed the bare feet of the Sunday school children, pressing them onto paper to make prints. Somewhat surprisingly, small feet were now being followed by larger, hairy feet, and then more delicate forms with painted toenails. The parents had joined in the fun too. Community involvement can make for great events. The door design was finally achieved using old white acid method. Next. Passing back through the inner sanctuary doors, back towards the exit, one passes the wall poem. Along all coasts, beside great rivers and small, confluence, congregation, baptism. These words include a sense far from the local. It pays homage to humankind crossing and recrossing the earth crust in the eternal search for what we don't yet know. Next. Science and art are the only tools the human race has ever had and ever will have. The 3-part memorial is dedicated to this phenomenon of light. 5 meters apart, the left-hand window displays Schrödinger's quantum equation for a light ray. Don't ask, but do note the solar cell built in at the top. Next. Similarly, the right-hand panel holds a cell. Together, they power small points of light embedded into the veins of a leaf. This is an active metaphor celebrating the phenomenon of photosynthesis, without which nothing would live on Earth. The light points pulsate gently, almost imperceptibly, as a sleeping breath. Next. We wait for light, but behold obscurity is my favorite quote from Isaiah. Between the potentially improving giants of science and art, we are inextricably mired in the revolving bear pit of human existence. The lettering is embossed and gilded on randomly shaped, roughly chipped, thick glass plates. Next. This is an exhibition piece exploring a graphic method I had found for carrying names for a large window, shortlisted for placement in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey in 1992. I found the crossword poem form in the Canterbury Codex Aureus manuscript from the year 750. The panel contains the Isaiah phrase and experiments with applied materials in an early time fragment experiment. It was commissioned for a European collection, last heard of at the Galerie du Vitrail in Chartres. Next. Many of my large works had been executed much earlier than the traditionally wrought Diamond Jubilee window and are experimental in nature. They appear in a variety of civic and private contexts. This gives me the greater freedom of expression to interact with the exciting environments which do not suffer from often the weary expectations and presumptions that traditional stained glass and its church association brings. This is a wall installation. Next, please. This is a wall installation of 2007, the Flowering of Edinburgh in the city chambers there. It was inaugurated by Princess Anne, who, descending from the top of the stairs beside me, asked what the most important thing about such a project was. A trusting and imaginative client, I responded. The city architect visibly grew a couple of inches taller. Next, a few more steps and then she stopped, turning her gaze slightly up to the left. Are these real stones up there? Yes, ma'am. Well, it wouldn't do if everyone were to do that, would it? No, ma'am. And I often imagine her 5 years afterwards at Buckingham Palace when the Jubilee drawing was being passed around. Look, mummy, it's that horrible man again who steals rocks from the environment. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Reyntiens, and I think we have the first slide, please. So this is the Diamond Jubilee window in Westminster Hall. And ironically, I would say that before I was chosen to sort of be one of the people to tender this job, I was working on a job which was to put some steel work into a round window, which needed a little bit of, it was 12 foot wide, so it was flapping around in the church. And so I realized that we had to change all the metalwork. I didn't really want to do the job, but I thought I need to do it. And that year, it happened to be the only real job I had that year. But the person in the congregation was the principal architect at Houses of Parliament. So one day he rang me up and said, we're possibly looking for stained glass window in Westminster Hall. Would you be the right person to speak to? And I said, yes, I would be. And so then 9 months later, it turned into commission. So this was in a light box for about a year before it went into the stonework. I really enjoyed working on this project. It was great fun. I had a great team with many different disciplines, and it's not just about one, it's about one's team. So we had Tim Node, Simon Ratcliffe, David Williams, Orlando Campbell, Tim Clarkson, Elizabeth Sinkova, Megan Stacey, Frank Higson. So you see, there's a whole bunch of people who someone like me needs to work, and they weren't always on the they didn't work right the way through. Some of them were there for a short time, but everyone brought their little piece of magic to the project. By the time the piece was finished, I was thrilled, but I spent most of the money making the window, so I didn't really do that well financially, but maybe something like this is not really what you need to worry about. I remember walking through once that we installed it into the Westminster North window, and we walked away from, me and Tim Clarkson, who was a sort of long-time glazer I worked with, we walked through the front doors of Westminster Hall, and we got about 2/3 of the way down the hall. Then we turned around and looked at it for the first time, and we thought, yeah, we've done okay. It's okay. So that was really, that was one of those moments, and it's in Westminster Hall, and I love the window. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is, I call this the Freedom Window. This is in St. Paul's Church, Mill Hill, and it is the William Wilberforce Memorial Window. He built the church in 1828, and it was finally consecrated shortly after his death in 1833. He also managed to bring in the Slavery Abolition Act in 1833. So it's decided that change should take an important part of this window. So I decided they ought to, so that the change should break as they go towards heaven, and they should turn golden once they got to heaven. In the borders, very small, but they're little red slashes. And that was because I wanted people to be reminded of the pain of slavery. And this is you see at the bottom, we painted in these sort of this ring into the bottom of the window, so it's bolted into the stonework. And that I just wanted to, that's my little reminder, because I didn't want people to forget that the church wasn't exactly innocent when it came to making profits out of the slavery thing. And I thought we should just stick that in. I was half expecting someone to say get rid of it, but they never did. So I was very happy about that. And it's a very embarrassing, ghastly point of our history. So we needed to sort of be slightly, remind everyone what's going on here. And it still excites me today. Actually, it's one of my favorite pieces. Next slide. Right. This is the Queen's Bishop Memorial Window, Michael Ashley Mann. This window was meant for a church in North Leach. And the first design was kind of led by the steering committee. I didn't really like the design. But nor did the church diocesan house, who massively got it refused. I was really relieved. So I designed something else. And the problem with that piece that I designed was politics got into the way, and they decided they no longer wanted a stained glass window in that church. So they moved to another church. The vicar took it to another church about 10 minutes down the road from this one. So I had to do a third design, and I was kind of left to do whatever I wanted. So I sort of did this, and I called it the Candles of Life. And it's a memorial to Bishop Michael Ashley Mann, but also at the same time, my cousin's 29-year-old son died. And so I inscripted a memorial to him in the paint. So it's a memorial to Hugh as well as Bishop Michael Mann. Hugh's folks live less than an hour away from the church, and they call it Hugh's Window, and it gives them a nice feeling knowing he's a part of it. Princess Anne's second marriage, Bishop Michael Mann conducted Princess Anne's second marriage. So it was with great excitement that she agreed to unveil the window. And in Gloucestershire, that's a really good way to make sure the church is absolutely full of people. It was chosen to do it evenings on late November, which is not a great time for a stained glass window. And the church was full by the time the window was unveiled. It was more like opening a waterfall than a stained glass window. The condensation was a nightmare, but everyone was very pleased, in spite of having a waterfall and not a stained glass window. But that eventually dried out, and it became, well, it's as you see it now. Okay, let's next. Right, these are the flowers of the Commonwealth Platinum Jubilee window in St. John's, Kensal Rise. I worked with a fabulous team. So basically, what we did was we just ended up working into this, and we used charcoal, pencil, collage, photographs. We used everything. In fact, we got to a certain stage where we didn't really have a clue how we were going to make it, but we enjoyed the design process. And then you take it to see the vicar and he'd say, can we have a couple of crowns also there and a flower? And then that sort of 5-thinged piece, which is a sort of something to do with the an Oxford college in the middle. So we had to keep on adding things to it. And it sort of became more and more sort of dynamic. And I didn't have a clue how we were going to do this, but we had, I worked with a really great team of my Formula One mechanics. I've got Tilly Shenstone and Maloan, and they really are good at figuring things out. And so together we sort of went sort of beyond things that I normally do in stained glass, and that's very exciting. Next slide. Next slide.
That was the next slide.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, that is, sorry, that is the next slide. So these are side by side, and it's in a very Victoriana sort of setting church, and they're up in the organ loft. And I just wanted it to be sort of something very different. And we achieved that. And I'm really thrilled with these. And I understand from the vicar sent a letter to the Queen that she looked at these on the 19th of August. So they could possibly be the last stained glass windows she saw. And she wrote back, or her secretary wrote back and said she was very pleased to be sent the pictures. So that was my time, isn't it?
Thank you very much, John. That was fantastic presentation from all 3 artists. I remember my master, David Stringle-Lamar, he said once that it's not just what you see, you need to be explained exactly what you see. And I have to say, I will never look again on those windows, or I can go back into this presentation and look at some of this artwork. And really, you need to really understand and be explained what you see. That was fantastic presentation. Thank you very much from all 3 of you. And now we're going to have a question time. And we've voted for our questions. And we have number 1 question, the most sort of favorite question at the moment that we have. We're going to go in the order of favorite questions. And this is question to anyone who would like to answer. Many of your pieces are set in a Christian context. Belief, church, chapel, cathedral, abbey, etc. How does having or not having a Christian faith affects how you execute your pieces? This is question from Robert Hammond. Wonderful question. Anybody would like to answer this question? How does having or not having Christian faith affects your artwork when you perform it for or at the Christian churches? Who would like to pick up this question? Helen?
I would say if my dad was really a big time Catholic, so faith was very important to him in his work. And I think he would have struggled if he didn't have that faith. He had this sort of automatic sort of a feeling that, you know, he was doing it ultimately for himself, but also God. So, and I'm not sure, I haven't quite picked up Catholicism in quite the same way as my folks, but, you know, there's something there, once a Catholic, always a Catholic. So there's always something there sort of, you know, that you think is sort of important. You need to think about it just in case.
Thank you,
That's
John.
terrible. Second.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Anyone else would like to answer this question? Oh, Helen?
I would say that I'm a spiritual person, and I am extremely inspired by Christianity in my works. I feel that it's quite nice to believe beyond yourself, and that lets all sorts of kind of channels of creativity come through. And so with stained glass, it being kind of intensified by the light is pretty powerful medium to work in. So I do think it can lift you beyond yourself, which is a very powerful statement in any religion, to be honest, but certainly within the one that I, have practiced in many buildings.
Thank you, Helen. Douglas, would you like to add anything?
Well, I actually like, I suppose I'm quite religious myself, certainly. I read a lot of poetry, but the exciting thing about this is the material and the opportunity of different architectural environments. Like Helen's, there are some new beautiful things going on, and John's dad was involved in a lot of that with a lot of good English artists in the past. I like the application and thinking. I see glass art through creativity and imagination, and sometimes one can feel thwarted by people's expectations. So I'm actually working for a public, not my public necessarily, but an erroneous public perception, I think, that stained glass is just associated with church. And I don't really like that, because the material and subject has so much more to give, really. So I tend to have expanded out of the Christian thing quite a bit.
Fantastic answer. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And next question, the most voted for, is from Monica Ziola. And it's, what is the most unusual place, building type, or location your commemorative glass was installed? The most unusual place that your glass was installed. Anyone?
I did a commemorative piece of a dog, and that ended up in someone's house.
Wow.
So it's like, this dog has gone on. It's a very, very well-known photographer, and so he took a photograph of the dog, then it got run over, and so it's not really in a strange place, but it's fantastic how one's pet can go from being a lovely fluffy thing and then get run over by a delivery driver and then gets reborn. And the guy's 3 kids look at this sort of commemorative piece to the dog, and so that dog, I mean, it carries on, it lives on.
Fantastic, fantastic answer. Next question is from Susanna, business growth consultant, and she's asking, why do you think being Glass artist is so special? What do you feel while you're making this art? The question to Helen Whittaker.
I enjoy the art and the craft. I come from 5 generations of craftsmen, and my mother used to take me around many galleries in my hometown of Manchester. So for me, being glazier is almost kind of putting all the artistry into something tangible and to make something out of something. So I enjoy the process of having ideas, and then there's many layers to being a stained glass artist, and I think for that's hooked me for the last 30 years. So that's why I enjoy being an artist and craftsperson.
Fantastic answer. We have question from anonymous attendee, and he's saying, I noticed that most of these examples are very traditional, illustrative, figurative, literal in approach. I wonder why this is so when compared to much more contemporary approach to window commissions made in Europe, such as the windows designed by Gerhard Richter in Cologne. And this question goes to Douglas, please. Do you have an opinion?
Yes. Yes, I was in the studio, Derek's, when the Cologne window was made, and it was in the Peters studio when they put in for the window as well. Both studios were involved in methods of translating Richter's paperwork into glass, which was very interesting indeed. Richter is a very, he ranges heavily on his work, brilliant person. Oh goodness, what was the question again?
The question was, we have in England, we have mostly their traditional design, whilst in Europe, the commissions, it's more contemporary. The windows.
There's more innovation over in Europe. That
more
is for sure. There's far more innovation and encouragement for new works. After the war, the French had a very good minister of art who got the whole thing up and running. The damaged cathedrals in France are incredible, and they were all ruined, and new stuff just came up using a lot of the French artists at the time. Stylistically, you go immediately across the border, you've got a very a kind of graphic German style, and you have Schreiter, who is a glass artist. He'd been you've got all these different people there. It's very stimulating. Of course, the studios are set up. When I reluctantly, in a way, started to leave Britain, there could be no processes here that could take my work. A technician in Britain would say, and this is over decades, would say, no, it's impossible, you can't do that. A technician in Germany says, well, that's interesting, and come behind you and help you to achieve your project. The spirit of experimentation here is, and not just in glass, is not considered to be that valuable. And so I could make a whole lecture on this particular question, actually.
Thank you very much. That's an interesting perspective, that we, in England, we need more innovation and more open-mindedness when it comes to sort of a new design, a new technology. Wonderful answer. Thank you, Douglas. And now I would like to pass the torch to our clerk, Liz Wickstead, and she's going to take us through our next events and so forth. Thank you, Liz.
Good evening, everybody. And I'd just like to tell you a bit about the events that are coming up and about joining the Glaziers in case anyone's interested. So we have a very wide range of type of events. We have webinars. We have some networking events that take a particular theme. One on the 27th of March that can still be booked on Eventbrite is about women in arts and business and the reasons, for example, why women artists tend to earn only 10% of the amounts earned by male artists. We also do traditional dinners, like black tie dinners, in our lovely hall here by London Bridge. And we have one of them coming up on the 25th of April. We're doing an overseas trip, which this year is to Athens. Last year we went to Antwerp. In the past, we've also been as far as Chicago, where there's a lot of glass by Louis Comfort Tiffany. We have an annual service each year, and we run a competition, the Stevens competition for emerging glass artists, which Helen Whittaker is chair of the judges for at present. And the award ceremony for that is on the 19th of June. So there's a whole lot going on. There's a whole lot more things after that. It's a very active organization. If you might be interested in getting in touch with me, there is the address for the website, glazierscompany.org.uk, and there's a membership page. And that membership page obviously gives details about it, or you can just drop me an email or anyone on this webinar, and we will get in touch with you. And you can see Glaziers Hall there by London Bridge, and we actually go right down into the water there. So it's quite an exciting place to work and to be a member of. I'd also just like to mention the location of some of the windows that have been talked about tonight, in case anyone is nearby and can access. Some of these places are a little tricky, but can access them and go and have a look at the windows, because it is phenomenal seeing them in real life when you've heard a bit about the composition process. So Helen's window, the memorial to the young man who died in Tanzania, is in Sopwith in Wiltshire. The Axis Mundi double window is in Wetheringset cum Brockford in Suffolk. And Douglas Hogg, one of his windows was part of a travelling exhibition in Shropshire. The Broughty Ferry window, and I hope I've pronounced that right, is it's in a funeral service room. So I guess it can be seen with permission, perhaps.
Yes.
Thank you, Douglas. John Reyntiens' large Jubilee window is, of course, in Westminster Hall. Anyone who went to the Queen's lying in state will have gone out of Westminster Hall underneath that window. And the beautiful Flowers of the Commonwealth final window there, that's in Kensal Green in London. So a whole lot of new destinations for everybody to visit.
Thank you very much, Liz. This is how you can get in touch with us. And now we are nearly at our final minutes of our presentation of our webinar. And I would like to say thank you to Helen, thank you to Douglas, thank you to John for giving us wonderful presentation and showing us this beautiful, amazing stained glass projects that they have done so far. And there's so many more to come in the many years to come yet. And I would also like to thank very much our audience, both overseas and both those in England, those who are already glaziers and learning about stained glass and painted glass. We learn as we are members of the Glaziers Company. And for those who doesn't know very much yet about stained glass, they have plenty of time, plenty of opportunities to learn. You can get in touch with us, as Liz said, and it's very wonderful to hear this amazing presentation about fantastic artists. We are so lucky to have so many talented artists in our company. And of course, there's other things that Glaziers do. We also support young and aspiring artists, and that's why we have our Stevens competition. And so if you on this webinar and you know a young and aspiring artist who would like to perform his artwork and show off his artwork to acclaimed artists, then please also keep in touch and get in touch with us. And I would like to, I'm not quite sure if our master would like to say a few words in conclusion or not.
Absolutely, yes. I can hardly resist saying a few words after that. Thank you very much, Mariana, for your skillful chairing of the event. Thank you very much to Helen, to Douglas and John for actually sharing some of your thoughts and this whole real process of the commissioning, the engagement with art that commemorates a particular subject, whether in fact that be a queen, some chap who's unfortunately lost their life earlier, or as John shared with us, a dog that was run over by a delivery van. So thank you very much for that. And also thank you to all the audience for that enormous amount of questions in there. Thank you very much, Mariana, for this. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Liz. Well done. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Until next time, have a lovely evening. Thank you and goodbye.